Hi, Lisa. Welcome to the NTM Growth Marketing Podcast. It's an honor to be speaking with you today.
Hi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. And I wanted to start off our show and talk about what brought us together for this episode, which was going to Allegheny College.
Yep.
And you graduated, I believe, a few years after myself. And what I thought was so interesting when I was doing some prep for this conversation is that you've had multiple different career changes
hmm
out of college. So I believe I saw on LinkedIn you were a biology major at Allegheny, and then you were thinking of being a lawyer, or maybe not a lawyer, but you studied law. Now you're in marketing. So tell us a little bit more of how you went on such a vastly different career trajectory from where you started at Allegheny.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I loved the most about Allegheny when I went there is just, I think of the tagline at the time was unusual combination. So it was like, oh, find all these different interests that you have and do all these different things. So,
People love making fun of that too.
they do, but I'm like, that's why I picked Allegheny. Like I love that about it. But I went there to major in biology, was pre-med. Um I minored in dance and movement studies and psychology,
Oh,
right? Like
very
had a
awesome.
great time, like really feel like I learned a lot. And then right out of college, I actually worked for a nonprofit for about 5 years. So that's
Mm.
kind of really was my first introduction to the marketing space, while also just like project management in general. And I really worked with college women from the age of like 18 to 22. So that was a really interesting experience, like taught me something about marketing. I realized I was good at it, but I was, good at a lot of other things, interested in a lot of other things. So I decided, hey, this was fun. I'm glad I spent this 5 years doing this, but I think I really want to go to law school now. So I went to law school for about a year and a half and COVID hit. And, I
Mm.
was doing legal internships. I was like, am I fully committed? Like, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? I'm very much an extrovert, and I felt like so much of every single one of my legal internships was just me sitting in a room by myself. And I enjoyed the research portion of it, did not enjoy the writing portion of it, and was like, I don't think I'm going to be happy doing this. So I was like, I need to make the choice. I need to decide, law school's not for me. That's okay. Kind of as a person that's always been an overachiever, like that sucked. Like that hurt to be like, hey, this isn't for me. Like you have to tell people that you quit law school and they're
Right.
like, really, you were doing so well. And it's like, yeah, but like I wasn't happy. I wasn't going to enjoy it. So then I was like, okay, like let me go back to what am I good at? Like I enjoy
Mm.
project management. I enjoy marketing. I enjoy planning events. And that's really how I've found my current company and my current role. I'm a manager of event marketing for a tech company called InVision. It's an online collaborative whiteboard. So really just do a lot of event planning, marketing, product management, all while getting to collaborate with a great team and great external partners. And it's fun. Like I have fun when I'm working, but I also feel like I'm continuing to grow as a marketer and learn new things every day.
What does your day-to-day look like at InVision?
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting combination of like, attending meetings where it's not just a meeting, we like to call them working sessions, where we actually like have our product open, which is an online whiteboard. We're actually like doing things, right? So we're like visually, we're on Zoom, we're having a conversation, but then we're also adding sticky notes, we're working through a problem, we're doing all these different things so that we're actually collaborating rather than just one person talking at a whole bunch of people that are like mics off and not saying anything. It really becomes more of a collaborative environment. So doing that with my team members, doing that with external partners that we have on our webinars, and then just like checking things off the list. Every single event that we do, I have like a 250 to-do list in Asana, and I'm like just checking things off and making sure that everything is prepared and good to go for our webinars.
What is it about marketing? I just want to take a step back that drew you to it.
Hmm. I think it's really like the people aspect,
Mhm.
right? So it's like, what do you need to say about your product? What story do you need to tell about your product or, your company, whatever it is? I like being able to the strategy of that, of being able to figure out like what do you need to do to have this be a product that both customers and companies keep coming back to and keep wanting to like be excited for your wins so that
Mhm.
you're also then a partner to them and excited for their wins when they're using your product.
Growing up, were you the person who was always organizing the events and the parties and was kind of the center of that? Or is this something you've grown into in your career of loving the events and bringing people together?
I think it's that I've always been like that kind of bossy leader type, right? Like I have to put the word bossy in there, but like, yes, it's leadership as well. But I definitely, I think just have always enjoyed like running things in that sense of like, let's make the to-do list, everyone. What are we going to do? What are we going to plan? Where are we going to go? And like kind of keeping everyone on track once we like make those plans and do those things.
I've heard, if you know Gary Vaynerchuk, I've heard him refer to himself as a benevolent dictator. So I get what you're saying of inserting that word before it to lessen the blow, I guess.
Yes, no, I think that's fair. I can't disagree with that.
You mentioned storytelling and
Mhm.
how that's a part of your day-to-day role through the webinars. Can you share a little bit more detail why storytelling is so important at InVision?
Yeah. Well, I think so much just like in general, right? Like I love people that are good storytellers, right? Like those are the people that I'm most excited to be around. I'm most excited to like hear about their day, hear about their life. And I think that's just something that's such an integral part of marketing because if
Mhm.
you're able to have a story that is impactful enough, people are going to remember it. They're going to remember what the problem was. They're going to remember how you solved the problem, hopefully, using your product, if we're marketing well for your company and for your product, you're including that as a part of the story. But it's not having that be the entire story.
Mhm.
I think so many times it's so easy to be, we're so focused on this one feature or this one thing that's doing really well, but that's not what a customer or company is looking for. They're looking for how that is a part of their story and just like the overarching, beginning end
Mhm.
type situation and how we can play a role in that and how we played role in that in other stories. But you've got to have a story for every single marketing thing that you do.
Do you consider yourself a good storyteller just in your day-to-day life, or are you the one telling the stories that captivate people?
I think my biggest issue with storytelling is that like I tell the longest stories in
Mm.
existence, right? Like I just am like, oh, but I've got to tell you every single little detail as a part of this.
So
And then
you're a long form podcast. You're not a TikTok reel.
oh yes, 100%. And it's one of those things that like then sometimes when I was once on a jury, a 2 week long murder robbery
Oh,
trial.
wow.
I could have a whole podcast just about that. But when I first started telling people about it, it would take me a long time. But then I got better and better as I told the
Mhm.
story. So I think that's part of storytelling is like practicing. It's going to get better as you tell the story. And I think in my work life, even when I write copy, if I'm writing an email, if I'm writing a website page, that first draft is very long. And I have to be
Mhm.
like, okay, get rid of the filler words, get rid of those additional things that just aren't important to people that aren't me.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that I know about myself as a storyteller and have really like worked to improve on over the years.
Are there any current stories that are captivating your attention, whether it's a Netflix show, a podcast, a book, and maybe share a little bit more around why that story is so captivating for you?
Hmm, that's a really good one. We did just start watching White Lotus.
Is that a
It's Netflix.
Netflix?
It's a
I'm so
Netflix
out
show.
of touch with anything that's not Cobra Kai or Stranger Things on Netflix.
Well, so it's interesting because like I would say like I'm very much a science fiction person, right? So like
Mhm.
that is most of what I watched like TV, movie, book wise, even yeah, reading. And with White Lotus, it's just one of those things that like pop culturally, like we started seeing a lot. We're like, oh, we should check it out. And they just do such a good job. There's like so many different characters, but
Mhm.
I am invested, and I'm only on season one, but like I'm so invested in every single person's story. And like the way that they overlap is just fascinating to me. There's like some just very interesting, you're like, oh, this is what I think is going to happen. And then the writers just did a really good job. Like they're surprising me at every turn that I'm like, that is not what I expected. Okay, now I have to like rethink all this foreshadowing that I've been doing in my mind that like was not correct.
Mhm. If we try to take that back to InVision and
Mhm.
the story that your brand is telling. Can you share a little bit about kind of what is the story of InVision and what are you trying to get across to a potential customer when they experience your brand?
Yeah, well, I think something that's really interesting about InVision is we've been a startup that's been around for almost 10 years. And
Mhm.
really, a lot of people have known us in the past as a design tool. We had a lot of different tools that were specifically for designers and really great for designers. We still have some of those tools, but really, since COVID hit, we've really been able to expand the personas that actually use our tool on a daily basis, because it's really a collaborative platform for anyone. So I'm someone in marketing. I use freehand all the time for any type of meeting that I'm hosting, any type of project that I'm doing. I'm able to have all of my different specialized tools kind of in one place and really in one place where other people are like, hey, Lisa's working on this project. Where can I find the information? Everything is in there, and it has integrations to all of my Asana boards and my Google documents, and any videos that I want to record and have someone watch async, they're able to do that. So that's something that, me in marketing, someone that's an engineer, someone that's in product, someone that's in HR, there's just all these different use cases for someone to come and be a part of the tool and be a part of the collaboration as a group without it being a tool that's like specifically made for like one person. It really was a tool made for everyone.
How then do you think about your customer avatar? If it's a tool for everyone in the way you're communicating with people, can you share your thought process then in your messaging?
Yeah. And I think that's something that you have to be really specific about, right? So we all host webinars or virtual events where it's like, hey, this is a webinar for product managers. We're going to talk about how product managers work through the product lifecycle process with, these 5 different templates from kickoffs to retrospectives. And that's something that's like super specific to that persona. But then sometimes you're able to do it something a little different when you're saying, hey, we're going to host a webinar about how to host meetings that spark joy. And it was interesting. So when we first put that out there, people were like, what does that mean? And then like thousands of people registered. And it was just such a hugely popular event because all of these people saw that as an issue. They were like, my meetings are not fun. People do not walk away from my meeting and are like, I'm happy, I'm joyful if I leave this meeting. So it's really being able to say, okay, that's not a webinar that is focused at one specific persona. That's a webinar that we're trying to help you solve an issue that like you're clearly having. And we find Q&A as a really important part of our webinar process. I think that's why a lot of the people that attend our webinars attend more than one, because they know, hey, if I have a question, they're going to answer it. Like we're going to get specific about what the issues people attending that webinar actually want to like talk to our, very high up leaders in all of these different ways. They're going to get to hear directly about their question from those leaders.
What advice would you give to put on a engaging webinars? I think we've all been to those webinars where we're there for a minute and then we click out and we're on YouTube. So what are some of the elements you think about as a team at InVision to create a compelling webinar for someone?
Yeah, well, I think right off the bat, you need to make sure that your title and description matches what is actually going to be talked about in the webinar. Because I think I've even gotten feedback on a couple of webinars where they're like, I don't know if you actually ever got to this bullet point. And I'm like, hey, that's fair. Like we wrote that, we created the content, and then sometimes you just run out of time. Like you legitimately just do not get to cover everything you hope to cover. So really making sure that there's not a mismatch on like the value people are going to get out of, setting aside 30, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour for your webinar. But then also really making sure that there is that kind of open channel. So whether that's using Zoom chat or the Q&A feature that people can actually interact not only with the speakers, but with each other. We actually almost always use freehand presentations. So we will actually have it as an edit, everyone can edit this freehand, and I'll send it out in the Zoom chat and people can add their own questions to the freehand presentation themselves. They can react to it. They can do all of these different things that not only interacting with the speakers, but interacting with other attendees too.
How do people actually get to your webinar and sign up? We all wish we were in the world where you just hit open meeting, and then there's 1,000 people there. So what are some of the ways you actually bring people into the webinar? Is it Facebook ads, organic search? Is it you have a big email database and you're mailing out? Can you share a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So we get the bulk of our registrations from our email database. We send out, very targeted emails based on what the content of the webinar is. So, if I am doing a webinar that is very specific to product, I'm not sending that to our contacts in marketing. They're just, they're more likely to unsubscribe if I'm sending them things that aren't relevant to them. So being targeted about that email to our database. We're also on, social media. So always posting. We actually had a really great teaser video that one of our speakers did yesterday that has just really done well, that I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to get a teaser video for all of our webinars moving forward, because that's really helping registration numbers. So email, social, we have done paid ads. I think it's harder to get people to register for a webinar through a paid ad. So a lot of times it's the first time they're ever hearing or seeing you. And do they want to spend 45 minutes of their time on someone you don't know? So I think that's where you have to kind of figure out, is it an impactful enough topic that you think putting money behind a paid ad is worth it? Otherwise, it might just be more of those, we do a lot of different things on our own website to promote it, of like, we have a butter bar across the top where it's like on any page of the website, it says, hey, this, exciting webinar topic coming up, register now, where like that is kind of a type of ad, but it's on our own website where we're not paying additional for it and can still get some registrations from it.
With that being said, around your email database and needing to have certain touch points until someone wants to attend a webinar, what are some of those steps before the webinar you do with your database, your social community, so they feel comfortable allocating 45 minutes of a specific time and day for your webinar presentation?
Yeah. Well, so I think that's interesting, because with the way that our email preferences work, someone might actually just be subscribed to like Lisa at InVision, like our webinar and event program. Whereas, so they might not see all of the other great emails that we send about new product releases or like onboarding or all these different content pieces. We have a podcast, we have different content that goes out. So there's all these different emails they could be getting, but they could also just be getting our event and webinar emails. So it's very interesting when you think about it from that lens. But a lot of times I think people really look at the subject line more than anything else, right? Like, does that subject line in preview text catch their attention enough that they say, hey, I'm willing to register? And we do send out, if you register and you're not able to attend, we do send out the recording the next day. So I think that does, doesn't help attendance rates, does boost registration numbers, because people trust that we are going to send them the webinar the next day, that, they can watch it on their own time. So I think it's really just, having that good marketing of like a good subject line, a good prop statement. But then once you get to the point where your marketing content is matching, like they know that they trust that webinar, that handbook, whatever it is that we're sending out is going to be good, they're just going to keep coming back again.
You had mentioned earlier in the conversation, I might have been engineering, but it was a different department than marketing.
Okay.
So what advice do you have as a marketer to work cross-departmentally, whether you need to work with sales, engineering, finance, and the CFO to approve the budget? What advice do you have?
Yeah. I mean, I think, we spend a lot of time working with people outside of our marketing team, whether that be people that are more like on the product side of things, whether that is sales, whether that is finance. And it's really just like taking the time to like build a relationship with those people. The people on our sales team, like, know what our event programs are. They know what it's happening before the events happen. After events, I post all the recordings, the presentations, the data about which of their customers were in attendance. I have them all saved in a Slack channel that someone can always go back and find that information if they need it. So I think it's just like setting up that relationship so that not only do people know who you are and know where they can find the information that's relevant to your marketing team, but also that you've like built the relationship that people are comfortable coming to you with that feedback, coming to you with those questions so that you can continue to build the relationship and adjust as needed.
Is it okay if I role play a scenario that I feel
Okay.
like marketers have experienced? It's not going to be too hard. It's a battle between marketing and a CFO. So let's say you
Yeah.
go to someone on the finance team and you want $1,000 budget for, let's just go to Facebook ads, even though you're not invested in it. And the CFO goes, okay, what's the ROI going to be? And you go, the data and the experiment, because we need to know what's going to work. And then the CFO is like, well, I need to know what the ROI is. And you're like, well, there's not going to be an ROI. We're experimenting, as that's marketing. What advice do you have for that marketer to have a more effective conversation with that CFO who doesn't necessarily understand digital advertising and split testing?
Yeah. I mean, I think the most helpful thing is to bring up past experiments that were successful. I think, we're really lucky at InVision. I think our entire team is very much in a space of experimentation. Like when if someone says, hey, I want to do this experiment, they're like, okay, tell me what it is. Tell me how much it's going to cost. Tell me why it's worth it to try. And I think that's where you have any type of examples of past experiments, and maybe it's showing off 2 or 3 where there's 2 experiments that worked really well and the ROI was proven versus an experiment where things didn't go as well. And you can try to say, hey, we're trying to recreate these other past experiments that went well so that we're continuing to spend money on things we know are successful rather than go down the path of this other failed experiment. We don't want to accidentally keep running programs or doing things or running these ads when we think they could be a failure, or maybe it's just something you've always done and you're not sure if it's worth it to keep doing or not. You've got to try different things, and you have to really help the finance department understand how testing those few things out is hopefully going to save them money in the long run. And I feel like as soon as I bring up saving money, everyone's like, oh, okay, now we're even a little more interested.
So you're speaking their language. Is there an experiment you hope to be able to do in 2023 from a marketing perspective? Like
Well,
maybe it's a new software, technology, platform, AI. Is there any experiment you're hoping for?
Well, what's interesting is I think, I've really spent most of my time at InVision. I started working here in March of 2021, and we had really been just spending a lot of time on our own webinar and events programs. That a lot of the experiments that I'm looking at for 2023 are actually participating in third-party conferences. So in-person third-party conferences, sometimes there's a virtual component, but really like getting ourselves and our name and our product out there to people that have no idea who we are. People, we're looking at a couple different conferences that are like chief information officer, IT buyer type situations that, yeah, we definitely have those people in our database. We've spoken to them before, but to go out and like find those new customers, those new companies on just a different scale. And it's definitely a time and money commitment, still trying to host our own kind of usual programming on the webinar front while also trying to do something different and spend the time and money and actually send people to these different places to really promote. And we kind of had like the start of the experiment just a couple weeks ago. We went to a product management conference in New York City, which had like 1,500 people, was the first in-person event that the company had done since like 2019. So, I mean, even just doing it for the first time, you learn a lot, and just things that I'm going to even try different in 2023 based on that one conference.
So as digital marketers, I think it's really easy to view rapport as liking an Instagram post or messaging back and forth on Slack. But what I'm hearing with you wanting to get out into in-person conferences is having both worlds going on. Can you share why that's important as a digital marketer to not just be so focused on what you're doing at your laptop, but get out there in real life and meet and talk to people?
Yeah. Well, I think a part of it is just like having that growth mindset of, right, if we just kind of keep going with our typical programming, we're just going to keep sending emails, interacting on social media, interacting on our website with our usual customers and our usual companies. We're not really getting our name out there. We're not really getting our product out there in a new way, which there's ways to do that, not like virtually, right? By spending a lot of money on things like paid ads or partnerships and all these different ways. But I think the benefit to that in person is like post-pandemic, and it's hard to even say post-pandemic because who knows what,
Right.
really, if we're really
I
there.
know a lot of people who got COVID in the last few weeks, so who knows?
Yes. So it's just kind of that, like, since COVID has happened, we're just in this, I think people are really excited to start seeing people again. And I think that's the benefit to the in-person of conference of, when I was there talking to people, some that have heard InVision before in our product, some that had never heard of us before, they were just like excited to hear about something new. They were excited to learn. They were excited, for the people that were our customers, they were excited to hear about new features. So I think it's just like adding that personal touch. You're able to like get to know that person and their problems on a little bit more of a personal level.
Mhm.
And then they're going to then come back and, they got a follow-up email from us with additional resources. They're now going to receive our nurture emails. They're now going to receive our webinar invitations, that we've now just created a new relationship with that person that will now hopefully carry on for the next couple of years, hopefully turn into sales opportunities, go the whole 9 yards.
If you were to look back on your career at InVision, or even your marketing your marketing career at the nonprofit right out of Allegheny, is there a marketing campaign that you're really proud of over the years? Campaign, experiment, project, however you want to describe it. One subject line that was dynamite.
Well, one, and it's interesting because this is both a mistake and a success at the same time. We had this webinar a couple of months ago that, just was like one of our normal webinars, right? Like nothing special, like just a webinar that was going to be a good, solid content, good speakers from internally. We felt good about the content. And just it had a good subject, like one of those emails that had a good subject line. The accident came in that the email went to a larger audience than it was supposed to. And I like log in the next day into Salesforce and saw that there was 4,000 registrations for this webinar. And we were all just like blown, like, it was one of those things where like, we got a lot out of that webinar in the sense of both marketing and sales goals, but it is not like no one expected that. It just was really a typical July webinar. Who would have expected that? Just, a few things going right and one thing going wrong, like really made it to our benefit.
I was just talking to someone about this the other day, and because in marketing, if you make a mistake like that, it's a learning experiment versus like a heart surgeon. I don't want to hear about failures from a heart surgeon. Like, keep that bottled up. I don't want to know about that if I'm going to go into the operating room with you. But can you share a little bit more around just why it's okay as a marketer to fail and learn from that?
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting is I think it helps you realize, this is our typical way that we decide targeting, in the email example. This is the typical way we do targeting. This is the typical engagement filters that we have, that our email program recommends we have to, keep the email hygiene healthy. All of these things that sometimes when you make a mistake, you realize that like, hey, not all of that was working the way that we thought it was. Look at all of these responses and opens and excitement around this webinar we were able to get through something that was a mistake, but also kind of showed off, hey, you could be doing this differently. And I think that's just like so true in any type of marketing, when you're willing to experiment, when you're willing to do an A/B test, when you're willing to try something new. Sometimes it goes badly, but sometimes it really is a success and you're able to adjust and just like also continually experiment. Because I think that's the other thing of, we do these experiments and then you're like, okay, I'm going to keep it like this for a little while. You've got to also decide how long is too long to keep things the status quo, because everyone, there's so many software companies out there. Everyone is changing their marketing efforts all the time, that you also have to make sure that you're willing to experiment and keep trying new things to like just keep up, like not even just stay the same, just like keep up with everyone and everything that they're trying.
I have a few last questions, and the first one is banking off of that one, which is how are you yourself keeping up with all these new marketing trends? Is it podcasts you love? Is it mentorship? Is it you're just in the trenches every day and you're self-reflective in a journal after work? How are you staying up to date on marketing trends?
I make sure that I'm registered to receive emails from not just like our products competitors. So I think that's like a really good way to make sure that you're keeping up to date. You know, for me, like looking at what other companies in that online collaboration, visual collaboration space are doing. But then also like I spend a fair amount of time like checking out resources from event like platforms. So there's, a lot of different, ways that you can host a webinar, but a lot of those different companies will have really good resources about how you can like create a webinar strategy, like how you can create a workshop or do all these different things that really show off. So I think it's like not just looking at the things for your product, but also saying, okay, if I'm an event marketer, what is just the things that I need to know about event marketing in general?
So my last question today is, what is the best purchase you've made for under $100 in the last 6 months, and why?
I saw this question ahead of time and I was like, ooh, I gotta think about this one. And really the purchase that I made that I thought really was relevant for this conversation was actually under $25. And I had this travel steamer for years, right? Just a travel steamer that I would bring to all of my events with me that got used in a lot of things that just kind of started to get old. So I was like, let me buy a new one. And I brought this new one with me to ProductCon New York for that conference just a couple weeks ago. And it was so entertaining how many other sponsors came up to us and asked to borrow this travel steamer, right? Just like this little, like this big, like little tiny travel steamer that then got a lot of conversation started with these other sponsors, which I would say that's just a pro tip in general. Like be nice to the people around you that are also sponsors, because that is just helpful to build those relationships that we then ended up just like getting to meet new people because of this little steamer. And our banner and tablecloth also looked really good for all the pictures, which, was the important part to me personally of why I packed it in my suitcase.
That's a great tip that I think to end it with as well is I'm more introverted. So sometimes I'll actually bring my massage gun to events and experiences. And that's a really easy way for people to come to me. So I think that's just like a great secret per se of like, if you are at an event or whatever, and you have some type of cool object, like it might allow other people to start conversations with you to promote a dialogue.
Yep. Hey, that's a good tip as well.
So Lisa, can you share just to head us off any links, social media handles, best ways to follow up with you and InVision?
Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Lisa Roane. I'm pretty sure my name will be in the title, but Roane is spelled Roane. And then my company's website is InVisionApp.com. I would definitely just recommend, if you do want to find out about any of the webinars or events that I'm hosting, that is where that information lives, as well as just finding out more about our online whiteboard. It's a really cool tool that I use as a marketer, and definitely think more and more people in the marketing are going to use it over the next couple of years.
And that's IN Vision.
Yes, INVISION.
Perfect. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. It was greatly appreciated.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.